There are certain moments in Ferrari's long, illustrious, and storied history when the external environment, public opinion, media reactions, and commentary from the wider Formula One paddock acts as the clearest and most revealing mirror of what is actually happening inside the team itself. The reactions observed in recent days to the statements made by John Elkann go far beyond the simple exposure of a communication misstep. They reveal, more profoundly, the inadequacy and fragility of a leadership posture that cannot be sustained in the eyes of seasoned Formula One professionals who intimately understand the inner workings of racing teams. Not anymore. Not at a time when criticism originates from figures who have spent decades observing, managing, and even shaping teams from the inside, who understand precisely which pressures can fracture a team and which measures are necessary to preserve unity, morale, and performance. At the core, the issue strikes directly at the heart of Ferrari's current and deeply rooted challenges: leadership. When criticism is publicly directed at the team's drivers, it has the potential to destabilize the entire organizational structure. The recent statement regarding Charles Leclerc's qualifying performance, asserting that it was overshadowed by the capabilities of the car rather than by the skill of the driver himself, highlights a fundamental and troubling misunderstanding of the subtle dynamics that operate within a top-tier Formula One team. Ferrari, at this precise moment in time, is navigating one of the most complex sporting and technical phases it has faced in recent memory, a period during which cohesion, trust, and mutual respect between management, engineers, and drivers are more crucial than ever before. A president in such a context should behave like a responsible and thoughtful head of the family. Criticism, if necessary, should remain internal, carefully measured and constructive, rather than public and destabilizing. Charles Leclerc's qualifying time, which placed him third on the grid, was achieved through his own skill, determination, and focus, not simply by the machinery he was entrusted with. Within this understanding lies the very essence of Ferrari's problem. A president speaking in the tone of an external commentator, pointing fingers at the drivers at the least opportune moment, without fully appreciating the delicate dynamics, sensitivities, and responsibilities inherent in his role, and without understanding the weight that his words carry. Responsibility is undeniably the key issue here. It is deeply inappropriate and counterproductive to imply that Charles Leclerc or Lewis Hamilton are prioritizing their own interests over those of the team, at a time when the parent company is navigating one of the most competitive and challenging periods in its modern sporting history. In moments when unity, alignment, and mutual trust are paramount, top-down criticism does little but create tension and sow the seeds of uncertainty. It takes an experienced and discerning eye to recognize this reality, and the fact that such an evaluation must be articulated from outside the organization is, in itself, a worrying and telling symptom of a structural issue. Diplomacy is not always the preferred tool in the heat and intensity of high-level competition, but candor, honesty, and measured judgment are invaluable. The criticism issued is not simply a defense of the driver, it constitutes a sharp and unequivocal indictment of leadership itself, a leadership that, at present, does not appear to fully comprehend or embrace its fundamental role. Leadership that dangerously conflates the paddock with a corporate boardroom, and the pressures of sporting competition with the mechanics of quarterly financial reporting. This situation represents a pointed and highly significant rebuke, both conceptually and practically. It serves as a clear certification that John Elkann, despite his prominence and status, is employing a language, judgment framework, and evaluative lens that do not belong in the highest echelons of motorsport. One cannot simply transpose categories and evaluative measures from entirely different technical or corporate arenas to assess performance in a sport where success is determined by millimeters, psychological resilience, and split-second decision-making under extreme physical and mental pressure. Perhaps the most striking and troubling element of the criticism concerns the fundamental contradiction at the heart of Ferrari's leadership issue. The president, in his public statements, speaks as though he were observing and evaluating decisions made by others, when in reality, those choices bear his own signature. Responsibility, therefore, cannot be delegated or obscured. Leadership is inherently accountable, directly and personally, for the trajectory of the team and the performance of its stars. Charles Leclerc and Lewis Hamilton, along with their engineers and strategic staff, operate within a framework that is defined and shaped by the decisions and behavior of the team's top leadership. This paints a sobering and rather stark portrait of Ferrari's current leadership landscape, a president who reacts impulsively in the heat of the moment, allowing emotion to guide public commentary, and who communicates more like an irritated and passionate fan than as the steady, thoughtful, and deliberate hand required to guide a Formula One team navigating one of the greatest regulatory, technical, and competitive revolutions of the decade. This brings us to the most dramatic and consequential point. Ferrari cannot afford to have an emotional president. The team cannot sustain a leadership style in which statements are made without strategic intent, and where there is no awareness that every word issued externally has the power to shape internal policy, team culture, and the psychological state of drivers, engineers, and operational staff. The criticism issued by veterans of the paddock is not personal. It is, in reality, a warning. A warning that is both simple in its message and urgent in its implications. Ferrari requires a president who genuinely understands how to lead, who is not merely an intermittent judge or commentator, but a figure whose role is to protect, guide, and provide clear and consistent direction to the entire organization. Leadership in Formula One is not merely a ceremonial title, it is a technical and strategic skill. It requires a profound understanding of organizational limits, an acute awareness of environmental pressures, and the ability to maintain cohesion under conditions of extraordinary stress and complexity. A president has the ability to win or lose the team without ever setting foot on the racetrack. His decisions, his tone, and his presence, or absence, can directly influence morale, performance, and ultimately championship outcomes. At this critical moment, the presence of such a figure is conspicuously absent. The gap is glaring and, when highlighted by those with deep knowledge of paddock dynamics, the resulting fissure is no longer simply an internal concern. It becomes structurally visible and threatens to undermine the organization precisely at the moment when it can least afford instability. The future of Ferrari, even before the commencement of the 2026 Formula One season, depends on a clear understanding of this reality. Leadership in Formula One is not only about making high-level decisions, it is about embodying stability, technical comprehension, psychological awareness, and patient strategic judgment. Every word, every action, and every decision emanating from the top reverberates through the entire garage, directly influencing culture, team morale, and operational performance. The Ferrari situation today serves as a cautionary tale about the critical importance of alignment between leadership and team culture. Public statements that even remotely appear to undermine drivers, regardless of intent, can erode trust, introduce unnecessary distractions, and compromise the focus required in a sport where every millisecond matters. True leadership in Formula One requires measured guidance, the protection of drivers, and the ability to ensure that the organization functions as a cohesive unit. It requires knowing precisely when to speak, when to act, and when silence is the wisest course. Leadership is not about being the most vocal or dramatic voice in the paddock. It is about being the steady, guiding voice that keeps the team united and aligned in pursuit of shared objectives. In the case of Ferrari, this is not an abstract or theoretical issue. The team is navigating one of the most significant technical transitions of a generation, a period in which the smallest operational or strategic decisions can determine whether an entire season is categorized as successful or catastrophic. A president who reacts emotionally, misjudges communication, or fails to recognize the implications of public statements risks destabilizing the entire operation. Leadership failures in this environment are not minor. They are magnified exponentially by the precision, intensity, and competitive pressures inherent to Formula One. The lessons are, therefore, unmistakable. Ferrari must prioritize strategic, informed, and stable leadership. Criticism of drivers, decisions, or processes, if it is to occur, must be both internal and constructive. Public statements must reinforce, rather than undermine, the team's collective mission. The stakes are extraordinarily high, and the margin for error is almost infinitesimal. Success in modern Formula One depends not only on the raw performance of the car, but on the seamless alignment of people, vision, and leadership. Without this alignment, even the most talented drivers, including Charles Leclerc and Lewis Hamilton, and the most capable engineers and strategic staff, can be hindered by organizational instability and miscommunication.